You know that moment when you walk into your own home and immediately feel worse? The pile on the chair that hasn't been a chair in weeks. The sink situation you've been not looking at since Tuesday. The floor near the door that's accumulated a geography of shoes, bags, and things you put down, meaning to deal with them, and then somehow never did. You're not lazy. You're not dirty. And you haven't stopped caring. But something keeps happening. Or not happening. And you can't quite explain it. You mean to clean. You think about cleaning. Sometimes you even start cleaning, and then 40 minutes later you find yourself holding a sock in the kitchen, wondering how you got there and why there's a coffee mug in your hand. What's actually going on is something most people have never been told, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a messy room the same way again. Here's what nobody tells you about people who live in persistent mess. It's not a character flaw. It's not laziness dressed up in psychology. And it's not that they've simply given up. A chronically messy space is almost always a symptom. It's the visible external evidence of something happening internally, something your nervous system is managing or failing to manage in the only way it currently can. The room isn't the problem. The room is the message. Picture this. You pick up a shirt from the floor. You're going to put it away. You carry it toward the bedroom. On the way, you notice a book that belongs on the shelf. You take the book to the living room. There's a dirty mug on the coffee table. You pick up the mug. Now you're heading to the kitchen. While you're there, you notice the sink and suddenly you're washing dishes, still holding a sock from 3 tasks ago, with the shirt somewhere behind you, the book still not on the shelf, and absolutely nothing finished. This isn't distraction. It has a name. Researchers who study cognitive function call it executive dysfunction. The difficulty in using the specific mental skills that allow you to plan a task, initiate it, and follow it through to completion. It's not about motivation. It's about the brain's ability to sequence. And when that system is taxed by stress, by sleep deprivation, by anxiety, by ADHD, by depression, by just too much, cleaning doesn't feel hard. It feels literally impossible. Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the world's leading researchers on attention and self-regulation, describes executive function as the brain's management system, the part of you that acts as your own internal project manager. When that system is depleted or dysregulated, you don't get a slightly less organized version of yourself. You get a version of yourself that cannot start tasks, cannot sequence them, and cannot hold the thread of what they were doing long enough to finish. The mess isn't proof that you don't care. It's proof that your project manager has been offline. Here's something specific you might recognize. You're not ignoring the mess. You're overwhelmed by it. And there's a meaningful difference between those two things. Researchers at UCLA's Center on Everyday Lives and Families documented something that most people feel but can't articulate. Women who described their homes as cluttered had measurably higher cortisol levels throughout the day. Not just when they looked at the mess, all day. The nervous system registers the environment as a persistent low-grade threat. It never fully relaxes. It never gets to rest. Here's the cruel paradox at the center of this. The clutter causes stress. The stress depletes the exact cognitive resources you'd need to deal with the clutter. So the mess grows, the overwhelm grows, the ability to act shrinks, and the whole system locks in place, spinning, going nowhere. This isn't a personal failing. This is a closed feedback loop. And you didn't design it. Your nervous system did, trying to keep you functional under conditions it wasn't built to sustain indefinitely. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because the mess isn't just stuff. Every single item in a cluttered space is an unmade decision. That pile of mail on the counter isn't paper. It's a stack of questions you haven't answered yet. That bag from 3 months ago still sitting by the door isn't a bag. It's a task that never got started. That sweater on the chair isn't just a sweater. It's a choice. Keep it, move it, donate it, fold it, hang it. 5 micro decisions embedded in one piece of fabric. Researchers who study decisional procrastination, the habitual delay in making choices, found that people who score high in indecisiveness experience significantly more distress from clutter than decisive people do. It's not that the mess bothers them more visually. It's that every object is actively asking them something, and they can't answer fast enough. The mess accumulates because saying, "I'll decide later," is always the path of least resistance. And every object you put down without deciding anything is a small withdrawal from your already depleted mental account. And here's the paradox that makes this so hard to talk about. Messy environments can actively harm focus, relationships, and emotional regulation, and they can simultaneously be where some of the most creative, sensitive, high-functioning people on Earth feel most at home. Research out of the University of Minnesota found that people who worked in messy environments were significantly more likely to generate creative solutions and choose novel options than people who worked in neat, organized spaces. The disorder that causes cognitive friction for some tasks actually liberates the mind from conventional thinking for others. So you might be someone whose brain genuinely produces its best work inside a certain level of beautiful chaos, whose ideas connect across the clutter in ways that a sterile, organized desk would actually suppress. That doesn't make the mess harmless. It just makes you complex. And complexity is not the same as broken. There's one more piece that almost nobody names. Being nagged about your mess doesn't just fail to help. Psychologically, it often makes the problem worse. There's a well-documented concept in psychology called reactance, the instinct to resist when we feel our autonomy is being threatened. When someone tells you to clean, your brain doesn't hear, "Here is helpful guidance." It hears, "You are being controlled," and the resistance that follows isn't stubbornness. It's a nervous system protecting its sense of agency in the only way it knows how. Self-determination theory, developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, tells us that sustainable behavior change requires three things: autonomy, competence, and connection. When cleaning feels externally imposed, it hits none of the three. When it becomes something you choose for your own reasons in your own time, the math changes completely. The motivation to clean has to come from the inside. And it can't come from the inside until the shame of not cleaning stops drowning everything else out. But here's what rarely gets acknowledged. Underneath the mess, there's something that looks a lot like grief, not for the clean house you don't have, for the version of yourself that used to have more capacity. The version who could come home and just deal with things, who didn't need to sit on the couch for an hour before they could function, who didn't experience the pile of mail as a physical threat. You grieve the ease of a life that felt manageable. The version of you who didn't need to recover from simply existing. You grieve the mornings when you woke up with enough energy, enough focus, enough of the thing that lets you get a shirt from one room to another without losing the thread entirely. How do you explain to someone that the mess isn't laziness? It's the physical record of every day you were running on empty and made it through anyway. Every pile is a day you survived. Every stack of unopened mail is a week you were holding together with both hands. The mess isn't evidence of your failures. It's the archaeological record of how hard it has been. So the next time you look around your space and feel the familiar collapse of self-judgment, stop just for a second and consider a different story. You are not a person who doesn't care about their home. You are a person whose nervous system has been carrying more than it was designed to carry for longer than most people would understand. And here's what the research actually shows. Cleaning, even small acts of cleaning, genuinely reduces cortisol. It restores a sense of control. It signals to your nervous system that the threat level has decreased, not because a clean house makes you a better person, but because your brain registers order as safety, and it has been waiting a long time to feel safe. You don't have to fix the whole thing today. You don't have to be transformed by a deep clean. You don't have the energy for. You just have to make one decision. Pick up one thing, put it somewhere intentional. That's it. That single act sends a message to your nervous system that you are here, you are present, and the world is slightly more manageable than it was a moment ago. The mess held you when you couldn't hold yourself. It asked nothing of you when everything felt like too much. And now, slowly, when you're ready, you get to let it go. A river doesn't fight its own current. It finds the path of least resistance and moves through. You've been holding still in still water for a long time. One small movement. That's all it takes to begin. If this hit home for you, please subscribe. And if you want to support these deep dives into the quiet psychology of everyday life, hit that join button to become a channel member. I would genuinely appreciate your support.